You are now listening to the sound of spookiness! Hey everybody, welcome to the sound of spookiness. It's me, your humble and obedient ghost, and I am joined by, well, man, you better be ready for some frights, because I've got two of them for you. I've got the Screecher, the preacher who's a screecher of spookiness, Benjamin Solzer, right there. How you doing, Ben?
Good.
Why don't you introduce the pastor who's a master of bleeding? Oh, no, that's from the Buccaneering. He's not really the pastor who's a master of reading here.
Well, but he's... Yeah, that's true.
Just be a master of insanity.
Right.
Insanity. Well, he is Jake Menskiller.
Right.
We know that. And he likes to kill men, I guess.
Mints.
Yeah, he likes to kill mints. He likes to eat those mints.
Yep, peppermints.
Yep, peppermints, any kind of mints. You guys ever go to a Christian thing with a bunch of junk
New
and
Testaments?
Get some testaments? Yeah, I've had testaments before. I went to the Christian Music Festival. I want to call it Aquafina, but that's because my brain has been mangled by Marvel. What's it called? Ichthus. I used to go to Ichthus every year.
Once.
Yeah.
You know, the vineyard in town probably sells testaments. Have you ever been in there?
I've not been to the vineyard in town.
Mm-mm.
Do you know that it exists?
I did not know that the vineyard in town exists.
There's a coffee shop in there. Have you gone and worked in there or something?
I've not gone and worked in there. It does have a coffee shop. Ben knows more about it than I do. No, the vineyard is the surviving... We used to have a family Christian, and then the vineyard family Christian ended up finally going out of business. But the vineyard's still there, still around, and still gross as ever. So...
But you might be able to get some testaments there.
You might be able to get some testaments.
Well...
And other random kitsch.
Less like vineyard and more like skin graveyard. Because this, if you haven't already guessed, folks, is a Halloween episode of our podcast. It's the most wonderful time of the fear.
My introduction of Jake is like a ghost because it disappeared.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
It never actually happened.
Never materialized.
Ben, I'm sorry. Why don't you go ahead and enter...
Ghostbusters Afterlife, man. That's what we're going to do in October.
What?
Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Ghostbusters Afterlife. That sounds like the kind of reference that Jake Menskiller, the pastor who's a master of insanity, would think to bring up on this podcast, folks. How you doing, Jake?
I'm good. How are you, Ben?
Great introduction, Ben.
Thanks, Nathan.
Or should I say suction into a wormhole
Of terror.
of terror. Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Listen, should Christians celebrate Halloween? That's what this episode's about. Oh, man. Can
I'll
I
tell
just
you what Christians shouldn't celebrate?
What's that?
Death. The
Yes.
occult. The demonic.
I agree.
All right, we're good.
Okay, thanks for listening, everybody. Every year around this time, we have people ask us to do this episode, I think, because it's something that people have to deal with every year. And it only gets worse in terms of the graphic accoutrement you're going to come across. They've got like holograms now. You can buy for $70 a hologram of a floating ghost or a demon guy that you can put in your yard. And
Yeah, just walk through Home Depot or Lowe's and see this sort of thing.
yeah, and the technology is pretty cool, actually. But the net effect is a lot of people who are, some of them listeners of our show, find themselves walking through Walmart or going down a neighborhood and just seeing celebrations of death, celebrations of the occult, this sort of thing. And they feel the tension because they're like, but I wanted to dress my kid up as a princess and go get some candy.
Yeah, I wanted to have a fun community event with friends and family, and it's kind of... I remember fondly going around on my bike and getting candy and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, some people, when they think of some people, when they think of E.T., the extraterrestrial, they think of that scene.
They think of Halloween.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is some people, when they think of Halloween, they think of that scene. Everybody on their bikes, a bunch of pop culture masks and stuff, and you're just going around and you're
running around and
fun, and it's just kind of part of the suburban package of middle America. It's just a sweet thing that we do, similar to caroling or putting up lights at Christmas time. You may or may not buy into what the holiday is all about, but you enjoy the pageantry, and it's a fun thing to do with your kids. You can have people go bobbing for COVID. There's just all kinds of things that you can do. But on the other hand, you have every year you're going to see emails go out and things get shared on social media in terms of the history of Halloween, the dark history, the connections to the occult and to the druids, who would go door to door and take virgins and leave jack-o'-lanterns or something like that. You'll see that kind of stuff every year. Just to address that real quickly, false. That stuff is all
make-believe.
Just make-believe. Didn't happen. I will link to a book on the history of Halloween if you really don't believe me. I mean, these kinds of internet legends and urban legends in general just get spread every year. I don't know. I think they make it easy for people. Oh, well, it's just bad. It's based on druid sacrifice and pagan worship of the old gods. That's easy. I guess we won't do it. But nothing's ever quite that easy. Halloween's not quite that easy. Really, Halloween comes from some Irish autumn festivals that they brought over in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it just kind of became a thing. And we owe it as much to marketers wanting to sell candy. Just like Valentine's Day, you can talk about the pagan origins till you're blue in the face.
And we did, as I recall.
Yes. Well, not one of our finest episodes, I don't think. So listen to this one. This is the definitive Sound of Sanity statement on Halloween. Should I just get my take, guys? Is that the easiest?
Probably.
Is that the easiest way to do this episode?
Yeah, I think so. Give your take, and then
you guys
see
can
if the devil's
push back.
advocate can.
We'll take it down.
So here's my take. Here's my take on actually both Halloween and Christmas. And for anyone who has listened to those really old episodes, I think my take has evolved since then a little bit. I think people approach holidays as if they are institutions. They look at them at this. You judge the holiday that is Halloween the same way you might judge Apple or Starbucks or the United States government. It's an institution. It serves to celebrate or to serve something. And if you like that thing, then you give yourself to the institution. If you don't like that thing, then you don't. And so every year, everybody's going to scramble to try and figure out, is Christmas actually in service of Jesus? And should I therefore like it? Or is it in service of Santa Claus? And should I therefore lump it? It's obviously a simplification. But we have it in our brains that we have to approach these things as institutions to be accepted or rejected. And the long and the short of my take is I just don't think that that's true. I don't think we have to approach holidays of these sorts monolithically. The way that I think of them is more like a season. It's a season that's going to come around inevitably, whether I want it to or not. There's going to be the Christmas season. There's going to be the Halloween season. People are going to be doing all kinds of things. It's going to mean all kinds of things to different people. And hey, if you find yourself in a neighborhood with a bunch of witches that are celebrating the occult, it would be a pretty bad idea to represent Halloween along with them. But if you find yourself in a suburban neighborhood where everybody just likes to dress up their kids as bumblebees and princesses and stuff and go get candy, I have no problem with that. And I think that you can buy into that part of the package without having to feel like you're buying into the whole package. It's not a monolithic thing. There's all kinds of things that Halloween represents to all kinds of people, and you can pick and choose. And it doesn't mean that you get to be stupid. I think the example I gave was a little silly of someone living in a neighborhood with a bunch of witches, but I think there are situations where they would just say, for us, subjectively speaking, this means a reverence of death, or this means poking fun at death in a way that as a Christian I simply cannot countenance either direction. A reverence for the occult, whatever. You could imagine a situation where you'd say, no way. But that situation may well not apply to most of our listeners. And I think that their consciences should be absolutely free to dress their little girl up as a princess and go get some candy if that's something that they would enjoy. Also, insofar as it is a season that is going to occur, whether you want it to or not, it seems awfully foolish not to take advantage of the one time a year that people are thinking about death. Maybe they're poking fun at it. Maybe they're being too reverential of it. But people are going to knock on your door and death is going to be on their minds. And you as a Christian, you as a church, you as a Christian community are going to decide not to take advantage of it because you feel like you can't be associated with this monolithic thing. That may be wise for some people in some contexts, but I don't think that every church, every community, every person has to be bound by that. So the long and the short of my take, I already said the long and the short, but the longer and the shorter of my take is let's just not approach these things monolithically. There's nothing that says we have to. And let's just take advantage of Christian freedom and American freedom to do what we think is wise. There's my take, guys. Oh no, it's the DAA, the Devil's Advocate alarm. That means someone has to argue the opposite opinion of what's been argued. So I'm guessing, Jake, you want to argue that.
I'm going to take it up. And I'm not really sure where to start. There are a bunch of places that we could start. One point I want to make is that you can't dissociate Halloween from the celebration of death and the occult. And even if you could have at some point in time, you can't anymore. You can't walk into Barnes & Noble without seeing a massive table full of not just like spooky ghost stories, but here are books of spells and how to become a Wiccan and how to become a witch and the wonderful history of our pastime of being a witch or a warlock and spells for modern day crystals and stuff like that. As our culture becomes more pagan, the more monolithic these sorts of things actually do become, and the more entangled they become. And at the same time, Scripture is very clear about not having anything to do with the occult or the demonic or a celebration of death, which is the antithesis of the Christian faith. We don't celebrate death. Jesus came to destroy it. Our hope is the resurrection of the dead. And so I don't see how you can create space for Christians to participate in something that ultimately and inevitably is tied in people's minds to a celebration of death and the demonic and the occult, and increasingly so.
Yeah, and I just think that's super heavy-handed and not at all true. Yeah, you can go to Barnes & Nobles and find a bunch of books on paganism. How many of your neighbors do you know that are actually given to Wiccan practices? How many witches do you know? Now, I'm not saying that nobody knows a witch, but actually, most of the people in your average middle American community, the types of people that listen to this show, remember Halloween and think of Halloween as not a celebration of death, not a celebration of the demonic, not a celebration of the occult, but a fun time to dress their kids up and go get candy. I mean, it's almost like where the law enters, there enters sin. Christians are so heavy-handed and feeling like it must be about the occult that they make it about the occult. Well, okay, I guess if you've made it about the occult, then let's not do it. But I don't think you had to. And I think you would have been a better witness for Jesus if you could have kept your stupid lights on when kids came to your door.
What if I kept the lights on and I explained to kids that, sorry, I love you, I'm happy to give you candy, but we don't celebrate this for these reasons.
That's fine. Give them some candy, though. If you keep your lights on so you can tell them why you're not giving them candy, then I just think you're a jerk.
I don't know that lights are a practice anywhere else outside of Bloomington.
Yeah.
So we better explain that.
Yeah. Bloomington is a cold, nasty community, and we all used to live there, and people will shut off their porch lights so that you know not to knock on that house because that person doesn't want any. You're not welcome bugging them.
At any house that does not have the porch lights lit up.
Right.
Period. So that's the thing. Maybe I'm sure other communities do it, but I don't know how common it is.
I mean, it is somewhat natural if you're going down a neighborhood. Oh, that house, the windows
but it's actually a local ordinance.
Right. Yeah, it's not a local ordinance everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, you can signal pretty well that you don't want to be bothered
Mhm.
but it's not a thing where you're ordered by the city government not to approach any house that has its porch lights on. And citizens are warned that if they have their porch lights on, they're fair game. So they'd better be sure to turn them off.
Right.
So anyhow, this is a little context for the whole
Yeah.
lights on thing that we were talking about.
The person specifically who reached out to us and was bothered by these kinds of things said, I don't really want to do a Harvest Day festival or a Reformation Day festival or whatever.
Let's not rebrand it.
Let's not rebrand it. Come on. Everybody knows if you do your Harvest Day party, it's actually a Halloween party. And I will say my gut impulse is to agree with that person. I very much resented as a Christian kid having to go to Harvest Day parties. I just thought it was so lame. I was just a dumb kid. So I don't know whether that feeling was actually, good. But man, we're all dressing up. We're getting candy.
It happens to be the 31st of October.
Right. And it would be a lot easier to invite my buddy to this Halloween party than it would be to some weird Christian harvest festival. Can we just call it a Halloween thing? Have I adequately answered the devil here? Or?
Well, I think that you have to deal with the strong statements of Scripture about having nothing to do with wicked or occult practices. I mean, you can say that we've made it a thing, that it doesn't have to be, but to have nothing to do with them of it all, don't be associated with such things. There's a strong pull to just say, hey, wait a minute. Okay, it doesn't have to be, but shouldn't we just make the lines?
Yeah, I get it.
Here?
If you're trying to parse, maybe you could parse it, but why bother?
Yeah, why bother parsing it when all that you get by parsing it is the risk of associating yourself with something God strongly forbids you be even remotely associated with. You're too busy, sort of like Paul's letter to the Corinthians, you're so busy asking about whether or not it's permissible, you forgot to ask whether or not it was beneficial, good.
Right. Well, I hate to bring up meat sacrificed to idols, but
it's a natural place to go.
I just brought it up. I'm sure the people whose conscience
I think it's the best place to go. It is, in fact, associated with demons and demon worship.
And much more visceral demon worship than a book of Wicca that you see at Barnes & Noble's.
We're actually sacrificing. These are actually being sacrificed to demonic entities.
And there's real
pagan
prostitutes giving their bodies to it and all kinds of things.
Be seen eating this meat and be perceived as having participated in these things.
And the Apostle Paul is like, well, okay, be willing not to do it for your weaker brother. There may be good places and times not to do Halloween for your weaker brother, but I think he is the weaker brother. I do not see that the practice of dressing your kid up in a fun costume and even having a little fun with a windy night with cobwebs and ghosts shaped like sheets with holes in them. I do not see that there's anything fundamentally or even tangentially linked to actually serving death or serving the occult. I think it's just a fun thing. And I think it's a great time to love people as a church. So I actually think there is a sense in which people always want to put the burden of proof on the person proving that we should celebrate it. It is such a great opportunity that I want to put the burden of proof back on the person proving that we shouldn't celebrate it. I get all the objections, and I get we shouldn't have anything to do with the occult, and I get that the actual love of death that simmers just beneath the surface of our culture is a profoundly disgusting and disturbing thing. I don't know, if we were forming our own Christian island community from scratch, would I introduce Halloween to it? Probably not. But I still think it is a thing that happens every year in the culture in which I am in. I need to be wise about how to engage with that culture and have the faith to engage with that culture. And that actually does mean parsing things with discernment. It actually does mean making hard choices. And in this particular case, I actually don't think the choice is that hard. Reject the bad stuff and find a good way to do the good stuff. Or if you're in a context where you feel like you can't parse it, reject it all. Great. But
one thing's clear, you can't embrace all of it.
Right.
That's clear.
But I think that that's true for Christmas. You can't embrace the rampant materialism of Christmas. You can't embrace the degraded spiritualism of much of our celebration of Christmas. You can't make angels into idols I personally don't think you should embrace the second commandment violations that are rampant throughout the imagery of Christmas. There's all kinds of things about Christmas that you just need to reject as a Christian. And there's all kinds of things that are wonderful to celebrate about it. And again, I just don't think that a monolithic approach to the whole thing is biblically required of us.
And you can say the same thing about Valentine's Day or the 4th of July. There are things to celebrate at the 4th of July. And there are things to not celebrate or worship at the 4th of July.
Yeah, I mean,
and it's not a sin to take your wife out on a date in the middle of February, because that's the most dark, depressing month of the year, and we've chosen to try to spice it up a little bit.
But let's talk about let's not talk about, but let's acknowledge the demonic amount of fornication and abortions and gross, perverse sexuality that comes out of Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge the drunkenness and debauchery that comes out of Christmas celebrations. I actually think when it comes to Halloween, the better argument is for most of the communities where we find ourselves is the sexual debauchery that young people are going to give themselves to, the sexy nurse outfits that are going to be. You go into any, or don't, but if you've ever found yourself in any Halloween store, in any costume shop, much of their business, I mean, maybe a good probably 60-70% of their business is facilitating fornication, actually. To me, that's actually
immodesty at the very
immodest. Yeah, well, fornication by a Sermon on the Mount definition at the
for sure.
It's
about kink,
right? And it's an excuse to subject girls to having to give guys really dumb kink, sexy nurse outfits, all that kind of stuff. That's actually the place where Halloween intersects with most of our lives in a pretty direct way. I mean, we probably all know somebody who's interested in the occult or given to darkness. I think if we don't know them, we've at least met them before. There are those people in our lives. But far and away, the people that are going to definitely be in most of our lives are the teenagers that are tempted to have sex and are given to immodesty. And we don't even think about that. So I would actually start there if I wanted to get rid of Halloween.
Yeah. And if we're doing that, we might as well get rid of prom while we're at
right.
it. Yeah. Talk about playing dress up. Hey, here's a thought, guys, in case it's never occurred to you before. A guy asks a girl to do a special thing, to dress special on a special night with a whole lot of expectations coming after. They spend money on each other. They have corsages and boutonnieres and a pretty dress and a tuxedo. And then it's supposed to end in something. What are they playing at? You tell me.
Or look at it from the guy's point of view. I rented a tux. I rented a limo. I got a special transportation. I did all this stuff for you.
Yeah.
There's an expectation that comes with that.
And we have a party at a hotel afterwards.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, so, okay, if I'm playing the devil, I say, okay, well, guys, you've proved that every institution is wrapped up with wickedness. So you really want to come back around and say, I'm not allowed to object to Halloween just because a bunch of other things are bad. Maybe let's be done with all of it.
Okay.
Yeah. If that's how you feel. Good luck.
Yeah, well, I think part of what I want to say is, if you're going to take that line, just don't be a hypocrite when it comes to everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Movies,
yeah.
TV shows.
Movies, TV shows, every other holiday. And that's fine. And you can still, I think, make the case that there's something more perverse and unsettling about Halloween because of its association with the occult and the demonic and death.
Mm-hmm.
It's more overt. Fine. I think you can, in fact, make that case. But at least see the tension in all the other places as well, and be charitable with the people who say, okay, we see the tensions, and this is the way that we're approaching it.
The other thing I would say is, do not discount the opportunity that you have as a Christian, the one time a year that it's guaranteed that everybody is going to be talking about the reality of a spiritual world, about the reality of good and evil, and about the reality of death.
And are going to be willing to be standing out on the sidewalk talking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what your communities are like, but last fall, we all sort of decided we didn't care about COVID or anything without deciding it.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't make kids come up to our doors. Everybody was sitting out on the end of their driveway blaring spooky thriller
Monster
and stuff
Mash.
and the Monster Mash from their Alexa devices that they pulled out to the end of their driveway. They had a separate little bucket that kids could come and get candy out of themselves. Some people set out hand sanitizer or something like that,
Right.
but they're just like, we're doing this. Kids aren't not going to go and have some fun, and the adults aren't not going to be out and hanging out and talking. And for us moving in at the end of July, it was the first chance that we had to meet several of our neighbors, because people felt weird about being outside and doing things and knocking on doors. And we felt weird about going and knocking on doors and saying, hey, we're your new neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that you're not afraid that we're killing you by saying hi.
Hey, it's the plague.
Yeah. But then what happened is a self-selected group of people, which amounted to probably about 80+% of our neighborhood. And we all kind of looked around and we're like, oh, we're all here. Cool. Got to talk and hang out in the street. Some people had boundaries, but even the doctor across the street was out there and talking, and also talking about his perception is, this was October of last year, but how his perception is that COVID's not so deadly and it's only going to get less deadly as it goes is sweet.
Yeah, it is sweet. And it just, I don't know. You can be out there saying, I don't like certain things about Halloween, but it feels like a shame to be inside your house when that sort of thing is happening. If people feel like they need to draw hard lines, I understand it, but it's hard for me to feel good about that aspect of it. The other final thing I would say, and this is not at all a defense of Halloween, A, and B, we have talked about this kind of thing before when we've talked about horror movies and stuff like that, but I think as we need to understand and have sympathy for the human impulse to A, acknowledge death and the demonic. I mean, we have such a materialistic society where everybody's in this conspiracy to not acknowledge either one as much as they possibly can. It feels really good for people once a year to acknowledge it. And let's not be shocked when the way that they do that is through jokes on the one hand, or through over reverence on the other hand. Of course, that's the best they've got. And it's not good, and that's not a defense of Halloween, but it is saying you do have an opportunity to talk to people about what's real when everyone's saying, okay, we've been not talking about this, but here's a skeleton. This is the thing that's underneath all of us. We're all this. You can't walk past a little plastic skeleton in a yard without having some sense of one day that's me. And I think Halloween, none of that's a defense of Halloween, but it is maybe meant to give you just a way of thinking about it. When everyone in your culture is like, okay, we can joke about it, but yeah, death is a thing. Or, okay, I'm really enamored with it, but yeah, death is a thing. That ought to give you an opportunity. It ought to give you, as a Christian, something to work with. One would think. Well, any more spooky, spooktacular thoughts?
I don't have any, Ben.
Don't have any.
All right, boils and ghouls. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it didn't frighten you too badly. I hope you have a happy Hollow Scream.
Putting a hat on a hat.
Putting a black
mask
cat
on a mask.
A mask on a mask. A black cat on a black cat. I don't know.
We got a black cat sleeping right here behind me.
Yeah, me and Ben have, every time we do a call like this with Jake, we get 7 years of bad luck.
It's pretty often that she does cross the screen.
Yep. Also, you record under a ladder, so it's 14 years of bad luck.
And I break a mirror.
Then you break a mirror, yeah. And you spill salt and don't throw it over your shoulder.
Yeah.
What if this was the end of this episode? Was this us admitting all the superstitions that we 100% buy into? 100% die into? Sorry, folks. I guess we needed a grim shot. Halloween's awesome. Happy Halloween, everybody. Go to patreon.com/ I can't do a punny version of it because I want you to actually give us money. So patreon.com / Sound of Sanity. And until next time,
stay sane.